Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. And RJ, we are just 8 days away from season 4 of the Seattle Kraken kicking off. I want it to happen already, RJ. I just want this to get there. I'm having a lot of fun watching preseason, watching training camp, seeing the roster battles that are developing that we'll talk about in a little bit, all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, RJ, I am ready for Kraken hockey, meaningful games, seeing CPA filled with fans. I'm ready for everybody to get to experience the Kraken Hockey Network. I want this to happen already, man.
Yeah, me too. I'm ready for it to count. It's fun watching all these games, but you know, when they score a goal, when they do something good, at the end of the day, the result doesn't matter, and I'm ready for that to not be the case anymore.
Definitely. So we're going to talk about these last couple preseason games that they have played. We'll talk about the roster battles and what we think our predictions anyway for the final roster will be, and go over some late some of the latest news and stuff that they have going on here. Of course, though, first we got to talk about Queen Anne Beerhall, RJ, a wonderful sponsor, and what kind of stuff they've got going on here. I know you have the latest.
Right. Well, there's plenty of stuff going on. It's the biggest time of the year, I think, at Queen Anne Beerhall, right? And that is Oktoberfest. This is what they do biggest, what they do best. And get on it now, because this is the last day of their big 5-day Oktoberfest celebration. They started off Ian Furness from the Kraken Hockey Network tapping the ceremonial keg a few days ago on, I believe that was Thursday. And they've got tons of Oktoberfest celebrations, including tonight. It's Hawktoberfest, with the Seahawks playing Monday Night Football, that big game against the Detroit Lions. You got a chance to cheer on the Seahawks. Remember the Seahawks-Lions game last year?
Yeah.
That was pretty exciting one. So they go and try and get another win against Detroit this year. And then, Dylan, I love the food. I have to talk about the food. They have a special Oktoberfest menu. So they've got the giant homemade pretzel that you know so well, but they also have a wurst platter with, I think, 3 different types of sausage. You got bratwurst, kielbasa, weisswurst, served with sauerkraut, red cabbage, and mustard, and curry ketchup, which is awesome. They have the Jager Schnitzel, which is my favorite. I love schnitzel. I would recommend it. Try that. If you're a little more daring, too, they have a 3-pound buffalo turkey leg.
What?
Have you heard of such a thing, Dylan?
A 3-pound turkey leg?
Yes. I will read the description. A massive, slow roasted turkey leg, seasoned to perfection and fall off the bone tender, juicy and flavorful. It's a feast in itself, served smothered in our homemade buffalo sauce. So I know you like buffalo sauce, Dylan.
I mean, I love a good buffalo wing, right? So this is in there. This is
like a buffalo
adjacent.
wing, just better.
It is
adjacent.
It's
and
large.
3 pounds.
Yes, 3 pounds. How big are those turkeys? What?
I know. I don't know what they're doing with the turkeys that they're sourcing here, but this is a 3-pound turkey leg that you can get at Queen Anne Beerhall for Oktoberfest.
That's incredible. That I would actually probably do for sure. Actually, I would do that. I don't know that I could finish it, but I would give it a try.
Bring a friend, share
Yes.
it, because I would not recommend. I almost put a disclaimer here. Do not try to eat this all yourself. I feel like that's not a good idea. Bring a friend, maybe even bring 2 friends. It's 3 pounds.
I was going to say, I'm sitting here thinking too, like, oh, well, I mean, it includes the bone probably in the weight. So but it's a bird bone. It's not like that weighs anything.
That's true. Yeah, it's probably pretty light. No, there's a lot of meat on that bone. So
yeah, that's absolutely wild. Now the other thing that comes to mind, not to just keep this bit going forever, but I would want some sauce on the side, because I feel like 3 pounds, that's a lot of meat. You're going to get through that first layer that is smothered in the sauce. You're going to need more sauce for the next layer, because I feel like this is probably like 3 or 4 layers deep worth of meat that you're going to have to work yourself through if it's indeed a 3-pound turkey leg.
Now, that is some smart thinking. I'm sure they would do that for you, though.
I bet.
They'll smother it in. If they're smothering it in the sauce originally, I think they're not going to be stingy with the sauce if you need a little bit more to finish off that.
Yeah. No, I think so as well. But that would be how I would do it, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, take Dylan's advice. Go to Queen Anne Beerhall and order that 3-pound turkey leg. If anyone gets that, send us a picture, please. I need to know how that actually works. How you're gonna finish that.
And the perfect time for them to send us a picture, RJ, would be for next week's deep dive episode, which is going to be a mailbag episode. So how's that for a segue?
Perfect as always, Dylan. You're already in mid-season form. I know it's preseason for everybody except you, Dylan.
Yeah,
you're ready to go. But yeah, it's going to be a mailbag next week. So reach out to us on, any of our social media through the Discord, even send us an email any way you want to reach out to us. But Emerald City HKY on the social media and ask us your Kraken questions. We will get to those on next week's episode. It'll be a fun mailbag. It'll be the day before the season starts.
Yep.
So all of those season opening questions, let us have them, and we'll tackle them all.
Yeah, seems like the perfect time for it. So I'm looking forward to that. Like I always do with the mailbag episodes. Our listeners always give us great questions to work with and everything there. Now, RJ, we talked last week and really on a couple streams that we've done on Patreon as well, how thankful we are to the Kraken for clearing these Mondays for us to record the deep dive, and also how they've really, they've been really good about giving us news announcements pre-deep dive instead of post-deep dive. And the only thing I could think of at this point, RJ, because it happened again today, is that somebody in the Kraken organization really is a fan of the deep dive. And they were just like, we're going to throw him a bone. A 3-pound turkey leg bone. We're going to throw it to them. We're going to clear the Monday schedules. We won't have training camps of those days. And we're going to start announcing things early on a Monday morning so that they can talk about it, which is what happened today.
Exactly. And it's been a few weeks. So if there is anybody that, that might be listening, thank you.
Yes.
We really do appreciate it.
Yes, we really do. It's doing us a solid. But the Kraken did announce some stuff. You referenced that, next week, deep dive will be one day before the season opener. I brought it up at the beginning. We are 8 days away from the season opener, and the Kraken did release some news in relation to that season opening game against St. Louis on Tuesday at 1:00. That great start time.
They're making the most of it.
They are.
I'll say that much.
That was an NHL decision, not a Kraken decision, for sure.
Right, that's true. The team did not decide that. That is for certain. They would not decide to host the game at a 1 p.m. start time. Or is it 1:30?
Is it 1:30? It might be 1:30. I mean, the festivities will start a little earlier. You want to be there for warm-ups.
Yeah, and actually, you want to be there a lot sooner than that, because the Kraken are doing a hooky for hockey, they're calling it. So basically, play hooky from school, play hooky from work, just skip everything that you would otherwise need to do and go watch this hockey game and show up early. They've got some festivities going on outside the arena before the game. They've got a beer garden thing. They've got the blue carpet. It's the first time they're doing this, where the players will walk up to the arena with a blue carpet, which, they'll have fans there. You can take pictures. I'm sure you can shake some hands. They'll probably sign some things. And so that'll be fun. I know other teams have done things like that too. I think the Golden Knights do like the gold carpet or whatever it is, right, for their opener. So the Kraken are going to do that. There's going to be a DJ and a drum line, face painters, sign making station, all of that stuff too. And then, Dylan, to kind of build some hype for the opener, we got a taste of this the other day when they wheeled out a giant Jared McCann bobblehead out of the locker room, and we're wondering what was that all for. So they're going to have bobbleheads, 4 giant life-size bobbleheads that are going to be placed in different locations around, I guess, various neighborhoods, and you can try and find them, and you have a chance to win tickets. Also, if you, I guess, find them, I'm trying to read through this. Fans who visit the bobbleheads can enter to win 2 tickets to the home opener using a QR code on the Dr. Bowie letter. And then, they encourage you to tag your selfies with the bobbleheads and all of that too. They did post a picture of the 4 of them. We saw, I think, just the back of the Jared McCann bobblehead, but they posted the other 3 of them as well, and they look pretty funny.
They do. They are. It's definitely something unique. They're trying something different here. I kind of like it though. And we know just from past giveaways, one of the biggest deals each season is when they announce what bobblehead giveaways are going to be given out that season, right? That's always a huge deal for a lot of fans. Fans love bobbleheads. I got one, the Larson one there behind me right now. So I actually kind of like this as a promo. Having the giant bobbleheads you can go and take your picture with, it's a little cheesy, whatever, but I actually feel like it's pretty on point for this fan base.
Well, if you like giant things, right? Placed in areas where you can go find them, you'll like this too, because they'll have 20-foot Kraken tentacles placed around the greater Seattle to surprise and delight fans, according to their release here. And yeah, you're encouraged to take pictures and tag them online and everything. But yeah, there's going to be giant 20-foot tentacles placed around Seattle that people can find.
This one I'm curious about because, I mean, I hope there's some explanation somewhere around them so that people just wandering Seattle aren't just like, oh, it's a giant 20-foot tentacle. 20 feet's pretty big, RJ. Like
it is. This is. Where would you even put it?
Well, that's what I'm kind of guessing. Like they got to go in parks and things like that, right? Like little square sections, right? Like town squares or whatever. It is pretty significant, and it does lead me to a tangent, and this is like a very big tangent here. Okay, you know how much I enjoy swimming and water and any sort of water activity, right? One that I've always wanted to do, and I just like never have had the opportunity to do it, would be like cliff diving and going off of a height, falling, and then ending up in water. And I've had this long-standing debate with a lot of people, but I don't think I've ever asked you, RJ. 20 feet. Would you jump off of something 20 feet tall? Would you jump off of a 20-foot tall tentacle into water? Because I think that's a no-brainer. 20 feet, that's super reasonable. I don't think that that's crazy at all to jump off of into water. I've jumped off of like high dive boards that are about that tall. Like I think it's fine. But a lot of people, when I ask that question, they're like, no, that is way too tall.
You'd have to pay me to do it. I'll say that much. I would not want to do that just for fun. I'm not a water creature like you are. I also don't trust myself to hit the water right. I'm sure I would slip.
Well, that's the beauty of 20 feet is like you'd be pretty safe. Like it's not like 80 feet where you got to like really do it right to not die. 20 feet, I feel like it's a little safer.
I don't trust myself. I'll let you do that one.
All right. I mean, pay you money to do it. Are we talking Matty Beniers money, or are we talking Ben Meyers money?
Oh, Ben Meyers money. It would take much less than Ben Meyers money, much less than NHL money.
Okay. But yeah, that is a question I've asked lots of people in the past, and apparently I'm the only person who thinks 20 feet is reasonable. But now I have a new idea, and that's tentacle diving. Gonna dive off the tentacles instead of a cliff.
You know what? Get me one of those turkey legs from the beer hall, and I'll do it.
All right.
That's the kind of money we're talking about.
Deal.
So not much.
Kraken, help us make it happen. Just set up one of the tentacles near some water we can jump off of.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to be a little more specific about which water it is.
Yes. It's got to be reasonable water to dive into. All right. So one of the bobbleheads, RJ, is Vince Dunn. And Vince Dunn is one of a couple players that we have to talk about here before we get into the preseason stuff and the roster battles, because we do have sort of an injury update.
Right. So we've been getting this question a lot from people, really been asking about Vince Dunn and Andre Burakovsky, because there's been, some injury situations with the two of them, and we got a little bit of clarity, kind of, some implied clarity, I guess, from Dan Bilesman the other day. So he was asked if Vince Dunn is going to play this preseason, because Dunn hasn't made his preseason debut. He's really the only regular who hasn't yet. And he said that he is progressing that way, which, would imply that maybe there's something like an injury he needs to progress through. Also in the same answer, he talked about Andre Burakovsky, and who was in a red jersey that day, and said he's also progressing. So we know that Burakovsky is banged up. Bilesman previously said he's maintaining a bump and a bruise. So that means he's a little banged up. So throwing Dunn in that same basket kind of implies that there's something that he's dealing with as well. I believe also that day, the two of them were just skating off to the side. Yeah, just the two of them off of practice. So that probably tells you all you need to know. Doesn't appear to be serious. They're both skating. They're both practicing every day. They both made the road trip to Edmonton and Calgary. So that's a good sign. But seems like Burakovsky and Dunn are both dealing with something. And I don't know, Dylan, what's the level of concern or alarm here with both of those?
I would say that the level of concern and alarm is a lot higher for Berkey than it is for Vince Dunn, because, I mean, just at the very least, I know we don't know the nature of either of these injuries at all, so it's very hard to judge anything. But the fact that Vince Dunn, I don't believe, has missed a day right? Didn't need the maintenance days that Berkey kind of did. Hasn't been in the red no contact jersey when skating with other people the way Berkey's is. And then just the injury history of the two players, right? We know Berkey's injury history. We know what this potentially could mean for really the rest of the season. Whereas with Vince Dunn, it seems like it's minor because he hasn't taken those same steps Berkey has. And Bilesma's quote too of he's progressing towards playing in the preseason really tells me that it's nothing that serious because they're thinking that he could still get in some work before the regular season starts. So I'm not as anywhere close to as concerned with Vince Dunn as I am about Andre Burakovsky. And a lot of that is unfair to Berkey because I'm just basing it off of past season stuff, a lot of which has just been really bad luck for him. But at some point, like it just kind of becomes this pattern, and we've seen this play out before, and it's brutal on everybody involved.
It is, and I hate to talk about it like this, but there's always going to be that level of concern, and especially concerning given that he played so well in his first preseason action, and he didn't hold back. I thought parts of last season he played kind of scared, which I don't blame him. After the injuries he dealt with, like it's going to take a little time to just mentally get back to that place where you feel that you're not going to get hurt every time you get touched. But it felt like he played the way he wanted to play. He played aggressively. He was winning board battles. He was physical. And he's banged up after just one game. And that is really concerning any way that you look at it. And I feel bad for him. And I hope this is just a minor thing. But it shows that this is not something we're ever going to really be able to feel totally comfortable about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's it's just tough all the way around, right? It's obviously toughest on him, I would imagine, just because he's got to deal with those questions and he's got to have those questions about himself and all that kind of stuff. And but it's tough on the team, not knowing when they're gonna have him, all that stuff, and for the fans as well. But there's just without knowing more, it's kind of hard to talk about beyond just. They're both dealing with something, and unfortunately, one of those players has a longer injury history.
Yeah. So I believe because morning skate is actually going on in
right
Calgary
now,
as we speak. Yes, as we record this. So maybe we'll get some news about one or both. I wouldn't count on both of them, but being in the lineup tonight. So we'll see if they play tonight or not.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too is like Berkey has looked good. Like we were excited for Berkey with that morning skate. Right, because they were working on the power play stuff. It looked like he was really comfortable with the player movement on the power play and the stuff he could do, and then he looked great in that game. And just for him to get hurt like right away, like one preseason game, it just it's awful.
Yeah, I kind of want to move on. It's just I hate to think about it.
Yep. All right. So preseason games, RJ. Speaking about them, we've gotten a couple more. Down, including the Kraken's first preseason win. But the biggest thing, RJ, beyond the fact that they've won a game, they're scoring more than they did in those first couple preseason games. Just they look like they're getting it as far as the systems that Coach Dan and his staff are installing right now. It really does look like it's starting to come together for them in a way that is pretty promising. I know the scoring stuff kind of concerned people after games 1 and 2 of the preseason. But since then, you look at these last couple games, they're scoring goals, and more importantly, you're seeing it play out on the ice a lot more than you did in those first couple preseason games where you're seeing guys go to the net front. You're seeing the team attack with speed and break out of their zone, come in, zone entries, entering a cycle, having kind of set plays where they can work it low to high, all that kind of stuff. We're seeing it from them. They're starting to execute on it. It is working. I mean, they arguably played their best game ever against the Oilers the other night. I know it's not full NHL rosters, but like it was a very promising game against the Oilers of all teams. I'm really, really excited about this just because so many of the systems that Coach Dan is putting in here, RJ, are just all of the systems that we wanted to see from them. We wanted to see net front stuff. We wanted to see them play with a little bit more speed. We wanted to see them work a little bit more east-west at times. And it's all there.
It is. And that's the most encouraging sign, right? Because you're not looking at the results in preseason. The score doesn't really matter. You're looking at the process. And the process seems to be progressing exactly as we'd hoped. We're seeing those signs of things they'd want to do. And after the first two games, right, the concern, they've only scored 1 goal a game. That's not good. They go out and score 3 the next game. They score 4 the game after that. And it's not just the number of goals, it's the way that they're happening. And they're coming from going to the net front, which they did not do nearly enough last season. Some of those greasy goals, I look at the Edmonton game because it has everything you want really from a goal scoring perspective. You've got Jacob Melanson just out there grinding away. That's as greasy of a goal as you're going to see, right? Then the next goal, you have Chalet on the power play, where that's puck movement and player movement down low. That's overloading down low, which they've tried to do a lot on the power play. We'll kind of get into more details on that, what we're seeing as far as the power play setups. But this is the kind of thing that they've been practicing, where you overload down low, you have the puck on one side and you find the guy back door. And beautiful pass from Ryan Winterton there.
Incredible. Yeah.
But that's exactly how you draw it up. And so they're able to execute on things like that. And then the next Kraken goal, where you have speed going from your own zone out to the offensive zone, you get numbers in transition, and you have Brandon Tanev kind of throw a little fluttering backhand towards the net that bounces in off John Hayden. But when you are able to attack with speed and move the puck quickly where the other team can't get set up and have time to react, you can have chaotic things like that happen. There's not much the opponent can do about it. So the way that all these goals are happening, and then the Ben Myers goal too, is Melanson wins a board battle in their own zone, kicks it out to Ben Myers, and all of a sudden he's away on a 2-on-1 rush, and the Oilers can only get one person back. Like, this is the way that Dan Bilesma's teams want to attack. This is the way they want to generate offense, and they're executing it much better than they were in the first couple games. You're seeing the progress.
Right. And that's what preseason's for, is for them to get these game reps. They're getting the reps in practice to learn the systems. They're getting all the work with the coaching staff, and then they're going out there and they're getting game reps where they can kind of figure it out and build the chemistry with each other and build that trust with each other of knowing exactly, hey, I'm going to have somebody here. I can throw the puck into this area. Somebody will be there for it, all that kind of stuff. It's just so important. And the speed at which we're seeing it progress, I think, is also very important. And this is where talking to Coach Dan Bilesma, I feel like, is just incredible, RJ. Like, it just keeps getting better and better talking with him, because, I believe it was in response to the question you had asked about how he feels like, and this was after the Friday night game, how he feels like the installation of the systems is going and everything after that first win. And he said something along the lines of, look, which already great way to start an answer about this. Look, we're not doing anything like special. Like, what we're running is not actually that complex. It's not like this insane X's and O's, crazy new strategy, all this kind of stuff. These are simple concepts, but what he wants from them is to go out there and win with execution of those simple concepts. And those simple concepts can kill you if you execute them with speed. Right. And that's what we're seeing. And this is something that we've seen happen against the Kraken so much, RJ, right? Like, we've seen all of those situations you just described happening for the other team against the Kraken, where the Kraken have been put in these situations where they're tough to defend goals. You only get one guy back. It's odd man rush, all that kind of stuff. So to see the Kraken go out there and prove that they can play that way and they can have success like this, and that if they do buy in to a solid structure that includes really multiple systems, right? Because you're talking about both the way you described it, and also Dan, when he brought up just kind of unprompted and described everything that went into a goal, which was also crazy and amazing to hear, that I'll get to in a little bit. But you're talking about defensive systems leading to turnovers, which then lead to breakout systems, which then lead to neutral zone systems, which then lead to zone entry systems, which then enters into offensive systems, right? And cycles and plays and what you want to do there. And so it's not necessarily one system, right? It's an overall structure of all of these systems working together and one leading to the next one. And the fact that after 2 preseason games, you then hit preseason game 3, and you're seeing all of that come together, and you're seeing guys execute at all of those levels all the way down the ice. I mean, I don't know about whatever internal time frame they had in mind for how fast that should all come together, and it is. We've looked at the whiteboards as they've been drawing up plays in training camp, right? And what was the one thing I said to you? I was like, it's kind of simple, but it's like recognizable, right? A lot of their stuff. So I know that the guys should have some familiarity with all of these things, but the fact that you're seeing them able to hit those progressions up and down the ice this fast by preseason game 3, and it wasn't even just like a fluke because you're seeing a whole different group of players the next night in a different game also do it. That's incredible to me, and that's really awesome, and that just makes me even more optimistic for the way the season can go.
Right. And I think the last podcast was just after the first preseason game. So we'd only seen one of those two groups debut. But I think we're seeing, the progression from both groups of players. And especially from, the guys that maybe we're going to see at the NHL level too. And you look at some of the negatives really through all 4 preseason games. And, to be honest, it was some of the guys who are probably going to be at the AHL level or in juniors. And, I look at, I'm sure, people want us to address, right? We're kind of gushing about that last game against the Oilers, right? And they did lose that game. They did give up 5 goals in addition to the 4 they scored. And, that one, they did only have 2 NHL defensemen really in the lineup for that one. And you look at the game where they had the other 4 NHL defensemen there, that Canucks game, and the shutdown D that they played for defending a lead pretty much that entire game, I thought was excellent.
Right. And when we talked about this with the first preseason game, right? The 6-1 Calgary loss. When the NHL defensemen were out there, nothing bad happened. There were no goals against. It was when everybody else was out there, right? So there is a level of that. And this goes back to, I think, also what I talked about from earlier on in training camp, right? Like there is different approaches, and there's just, with everybody, there's a different speed, right? Between the different levels. The AHL is faster than the CHL. The NHL is faster than the AHL, but there's mindsets that you develop from playing at those different levels. And if you've played a significant amount of time, let's say in the NHL, or more than just a little bit of time in the NHL as a defenseman, you understand how fast the game is, one, but also then how aggressive you have to act in order to get in the other team's way. Right. And that's why I think we were seeing when I was talking about the 2-on-1 drills where the NHL defensemen step up huge. They're trying to get in there. They're trying to disrupt the play before it even starts with their stick, where the AHL guys just kind of step up into the lane. And then the CHL guys just kind of wait for the offense to make a move, and they're very reactionary. I think that is something where it's a mentality thing, but it's a necessary mentality you learn from playing at those different levels. You have to progressively get more and more aggressive, more and more decisive, and more proactive when defending as you progress up through the system. And I think that's part of this is, look, if you're going to play with speed, you're kind of baiting the other team to play with speed as well, right? They're going to have to match that level and that intensity. This is something the Kraken, I feel like, struggled with last year. I think there was even times where we heard that maybe from Coach Hackstall, right? If the Kraken are going to do it and play with speed, like I said, you're baiting the other team to play with speed back on you. Your defensemen have to be ready for that. And if it's a team that isn't necessarily used to playing with speed, or they're only going to have kind of some, halfway decent rushes against you, you want your defensemen to play aggressive. You want them to be decisive. You want them and need them to be proactive. And I think the NHL defensemen have been. The other guys maybe not as much because they just aren't as experienced playing at that level and playing with that pace yet.
Yeah, and that's something that even, like, say, Philip Grubauer yesterday acknowledged a little bit when he was just asked how he's feeling through his preseason, right? And he said, it was a couple days ago.
It was a couple days ago, yeah.
Because it was before this last game against Edmonton. But the first thing he said was, the first game, he was diplomatic about it, but he said, we played with a group that, I don't think is around anymore. So the first one's always going to be tough to get into. And so I think that's just kind of a reality of preseason that you do have to acknowledge.
Yes. But, going back to what I was talking about when Dan kind of unprompted broke down a play, I thought this was also very telling about the culture and stuff that he's bringing in and that the coaching staff's going to have and everything involved, where he has no problems talking about what it is they're trying to do, right? There's an openness and a sincerity about him that I feel like is just kind of night and day when it comes to talking about the on ice stuff with what we got last year with Dave Hackstall, where there was a lot of questions of like, what is this team kind of trying to do? And that was a coaching staff that was not going to divulge anything, right? Everything was a big secret. Whereas with Dan, I feel very comfortable now after that one scrum we had with him, talking and pointing out plays and talking about these systems with him, and he's just going to talk back because he seems to kind of get that, you watch 5 minutes of tape on a team. If you know what you're looking for, you kind of know what that team's trying to do out there, right? Like this isn't like the NFL or something where systems and plays and all this stuff kind of has to be secret because it gives your opponent a big advantage if they know what's coming, right? It's hockey. There's like 3 things you can do at any of those given levels, right? Everybody's going to be running one of 3 defensive systems, one of 3 different offensive systems, one of 3 different forechecks, really 2 different forechecks, right? So like there's just only so much you can actually do in hockey. So it doesn't have to be that secretive. And I think just the fact that the coach is willing to talk about these things and explain it to the media and thus explain it to the fans, then they're doing a great job behind the scenes of explaining it all to the players, working with the players on it, getting them on board, having them really understand the ins and outs of what their job is going to be in all of those things. And that was the big thing that stuck with me was if he's willing to tell us this, then just imagine what he's telling the players behind the scenes.
Exactly. And you mentioned, right, there's only like 3 systems for each type of thing, maybe 2, right, for certain things. And so when that's all the same or roughly the same, what it comes down to is how coherently can you execute it, right? How cohesively can you bring that together on the ice? And a lot of that is driven by how well can a coaching staff communicate that to players. And like you said, that's a good sign if they're communicating it this well to us. They must be communicating it pretty well to the players, and that we've heard from the players, that they're on the same page where they've brought things up unprompted, right? Is they're on the same page. So that's a good sign as well from the coaching staff and just their ability to communicate. Also from the side of us as media or fans listening to, it means that win or loss, it's going to be less frustrating or even potentially more fun, right? To follow the team this year. Because Dylan, you remember all of those post-game live shows that we did toward the end of last season. It felt like a broken record, right? But we were just saying, right, we don't know what the plan is. We cannot figure, because the coaching staff's not telling us what the plan is, and we can't figure it out ourselves. We just watching the games, we cannot figure out what they're going for here. I'm confident that will never be the case this season. Look, I mean, doesn't mean they're necessarily going to win all the games, but we're going to know what the plan is. We're going to know what they're trying to execute, and we'll be able to see whether they're executing it well or not. And we can, I think, more fairly and effectively judge what's going on. And I feel like from a media perspective, that's just a lot of almost all you can ask for, right?
Yes. The whiteboard gets to come back, right? Like the whiteboard was like not around for post-game lives last year because what was I supposed to do with it? I had no idea. There was nothing for me to do. I could break down how great these other teams are playing the Kraken. You want me to do that? Right? That is something I'm very excited for, is the ability to break this stuff down, explain it after we see a goal, right? Being able to describe how that goal got set up, how it broke out from their own zone and then transitioned over and what they were able to do with it. And the other thing is, and we know this from Coachella Valley, RJ, Dan is unafraid. And this is really more so like a playoff time thing, and we'll see if the Kraken get there. But I could see this maybe for some big games too, or games that are really important on the schedule that they hit in the regular season. Dan does not mind making mid-game adjustments based on what another team is doing, right? Whether it's, they're defending us in this way, we have to change up how we're attacking them, or really the one that we saw a lot in Coachella Valley during their playoff run, both of their playoff runs really, but I remember, talking about it with you this last one when we were at that game against Milwaukee, is no problem changing up how they defend a team. Right? If a team is going to work towards the interior, guess what? Defensive system completely changes to try to take away the passes to the inside. And you just kind of minimize the fact that team has size and they can bully you inside and kind of get in there. You're going to force them to take a bunch of shots from the perimeter and try to not let them get through where their big bodies are going to be able to get there for rebounds. Right? And you'd see him make those adjustments mid-game based on what the other team was doing. Whether the Firebirds were winning or losing, he was making these adjustments, by the way, right? It was just always we can always be better. We can always be doing something better. Even if we're winning this game, we could still be better and better handle this team. And that's something I'm going to be really interested in. Like I said, that's really more of a postseason thing. but I do wonder, and I could see it happening for some big, regular season games. Maybe for the third period, we see them come out and do something a little bit different, which again would just absolutely blow my mind and give me so much ammunition to talk about on a post-game live compared to anything we had before.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I remember in the playoffs last year too, where we went to one of the Milwaukee games, and you had been kind of explaining to me what the Firebirds have been doing defensively and systems wise against Ontario in the previous series. And I think you were getting ready to explain that to me. Okay, well, here's what they're going to do. Yeah. And then they were just doing something entirely different. And so you're like, okay, hang on. No, I need to figure this out.
Give me a period to look at it.
Exactly. So that was pretty entertaining. Just for me personally.
Well, and then he changed it up for the third period in that game too. Like it didn't even stay consistent for the entire game, but it worked. And so again, just cannot say enough good things about Coach Bilesma and the coaching staff that he's got around him, and just all the ways in which they're going about everything. I just think it's exactly what Kraken fans kind of needed. As much as Kraken fans needed, the ability to watch games and have them become more accessible, which was, the other big thing of this offseason. I think Kraken fans, they're going to appreciate kind of the honesty, the openness, and the level of kind of educating that he brings when he talks.
Yeah, and actually, you mentioned the ability to watch games, and if I can go on a quick aside here, we did get the chance to watch the Kraken Hockey Network for the first time, really, when doing our live commentary, and we talked about it a little bit. But some tweaks to be made, like maybe the score bug just a little bit more in the corner, but like so far, so good. I've been impressed by what I've seen, and especially how smooth it looks this early on.
Yeah, it's running remarkably well. You could tell that it's kind of it's probably trimmed down from what they ultimately want. But I feel like going for something that works from day one and that you can slowly build up and make fancier and better and all that kind of stuff is the better way to go, particularly this close to a season. But yeah, it's been phenomenal to watch and to be able to just stream the game easily. I can't speak to watching it over the air, but streaming it has just been so nice, RJ.
Yeah, especially compared to like the ESPN Plus play or any of the stuff we were dealing with last season. So nice. The ability to just go quickly rewind 10 seconds, go look back, go back to live, no problem. Just that is really, really nice.
It is. It has been.
I thought that was worth at least a quick mention.
It is.
Kind of
no, it definitely is.
Cuts and stuff.
It definitely is. So yeah, lots of good stuff there coming from the preseason games. You had mentioned when we talked to Grubauer, by the way, and kind of the differences there. And I did want to mention, because this was something that, to be honest, I don't think I had ever really considered all that much. But when he was asked kind of about does anything change for him as the goaltender as the defensive system and everything in front of him is changing, and he brought up something really interesting, which was the thing that changes is the when to expect shots and where to expect them from, and the depth at which he needs to start looking for shots coming in through bodies and all of that kind of stuff. And I thought that was an incredibly insightful moment from him. And that's just something I've never thought of, is that, yes, as a defensive system changes, they're pushing, the opposing team when they're on offense into different pockets in which you want shots to come from. Because, obviously you never want shots, but they're going to happen. And so you're pushing them into different kind of areas that you want them to be shooting from. And for the goaltender to have to adjust to that and understand what level of depth that's going to be coming from, what angles and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, that would be a conversation you'd have to have with the goaltenders of, hey, this is what we're planning for. Be ready to see a lot of it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember asking that question, and I was I was impressed by the answer, but also, it's like you said, it's something I never thought about, where in a different defensive system too. And I'm looking kind of at the transcript of the quote here, and he's talking about, it's not so much that, there's always screens and there's always tips and things like that, but it's basically who is open at what time, because you're leaving different people open in different times and spaces that you have to get used to. And I never really thought about that. I mean, you think about it from just okay, you try and limit shot quality and you figure that out. But for a goalie, that's an entirely different maybe set of shots or situations that they just didn't even really see last season, because maybe last season's system was designed to just prevent all the shots from this area, and we're just not going to let anyone get here. And all of a sudden, okay, we are going to leave this open. You better get used to seeing a lot of shots from this spot. And I don't know how much you can even really, I guess you could practice it still in training camp, and
yeah, but
it's hard to replicate that movement in the traffic, right?
Yeah. No, that definitely feels like a game rep type of thing that they're just going to have to learn.
And so, given that we haven't really talked a ton about the goaltending, because look, there's no position battle here. It's going to be
Right.
Grubauer, it's going to be Decord, that's going to be the goalie tandem, and so like, okay, yeah, they're just doing the normal things with the goalie coaches. I think it's easy to assume that, but no, that they're really not able to just do their normal thing. They have to get adjusted to the new systems, just like the skaters do. Even though they don't have to get into different spots, they're in the crease, but they have to see all different types of shots, and so that's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And it was just, again, it was a moment of, it was a peek behind the curtain that we're just not really used to getting. And we've been getting it, obviously, from the coaching staff, like I've been talking about for probably way too much. But we're starting to get it from the players even, right? Like it just feels like a cultural change. Like I don't remember Kraken goalies talking like that before. Or when Oliver Bjorkstrand was talking about the player movement that they want them to have on the power play. Like I just don't remember under the previous coaching staff players really ever being that open about talking about what they can go out there and do and what they're working on and all of that stuff. Like that very much feels like part of that larger culture shift that we've seen this offseason.
Right. It was more rare. And as someone who's been around, like in person for really the last like 3 seasons, it was more rare than I'm seeing it now. And Grubauer, to his credit, was very candid, was very open in that scrum. I mean, he was also asked too about, do you like to, or how much, preseason work do you want to get, right? How many games do you want to get in? He's like, well, that's not my decision. That's the coach's call. And which is, kind of the right answer. But, but then, he was pressed a little bit. Okay, well, do you like to get a lot of preseason action? He said, yes, you do, because it feels like almost you can't get enough because of all these things you have to adjust to. These, it really does help to get those extra games in, which, might be a reason why we won't see like a Nicholas Coco in the preseason, because you want to actually get those reps to a Grubauer and a Decord who are going to be your goalies, throughout the regular season.
Right. And that has seemingly been the preseason plan, as really for games 3 and 4, they played full games and would assume that they would do so for games 5 and 6 as well.
Which is something that I questioned kind of going into the preseason, right? And you think, oh, these starters are getting a lot of games because you're hoping nobody gets hurt. And you're like, okay, they're already going to have a lot of wear and tear on them potentially. Do you really want to get those extra games where they have to deal with this, especially in front of preseason rosters? And so that was the decision I was kind of questioning myself. But the more that Grubauer and the team really has been open about their process, I can see now, okay, they really they have more to work on than I had previously thought. They need those game reps more than I had previously thought. And it makes more sense to me.
Yeah, no, it totally does. I'm right there with you. And again, you remove all of these questions that fans have, that the media is talking about, all that stuff, by just being open and talking about it. Again, these are not like, this is not top secret information that has to be played close to the chest. Like it just isn't. This is stuff you could just be open about and explain the process, and everybody will be understanding, and they cut you a break and everything's fine. I just saying.
Yeah. At least in this market.
At least in this market. Yes. I could see maybe in some Canadian markets, maybe they wouldn't like that, but it's definitely appreciated here. And I know the ECH community would appreciate it as well. Let's transition, RJ, and talk kind of some roster battles and stuff. Now, we knew going into this preseason and training camp and everything, there wasn't necessarily going to be as many battles as there have been in years past, right? Once Brian Dumoulin got moved, you knew that like the defensemen, it was pretty set which 6 guys are going to be the regular 6 guys that we're going to see in the lineup, assuming everybody's healthy. We knew the goaltending matchup, all that kind of stuff, right? Forward wise, like they kind of have 4 lines already. There's the overall cap situation. At some point, somebody's got to move, all that kind of stuff. But I think one of the things that we're really seeing, especially up front, RJ, with the forward battle is the battle for, yes, when somebody gets moved, who is going to be able to take that kind of regular everyday spot on the 4th line, and also who are going to be the guys that are going to be up with the big club and be the kind of healthy scratches there at forward, because and really on defense too, that's maybe becoming a question. And I kind of want to get into that right now, but you made a face. Did some news come out from like Morning Skate or something?
No, it was the Flames lineup, and I was just looking at Huberdeau on the 3rd line and people talking about it. Don't worry about that.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Someone made a funny Jonathan Huberdeau joke. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
It's fine. So where do you want to kind of start this discussion with RJ here?
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, if we're talking about, I guess let's talk about the overall context. And I'll go over this really quickly because I talked about it on the Armchair GM stream. But just looking at where the overall roster stands, because normally, if the Kraken had a ton of cap space the way that they have in the last couple seasons, be like, okay, the roster is going to get trimmed to 23, and you just need to look at, okay, we're going to have 2 reserve forwards, 1 reserve defenseman. Who's that going to be? What are the numbers going to be? Right?
Yeah.
Simple. Not so simple this year, because the Kraken do have to get under the cap by opening day. They do have to have a roster that is cap compliant. And right now, if they were to have a 23-man roster, they're going to be over the cap. They're over the cap by about $1.5 million. But you can get under the cap if you send down enough players just to have a 21-man roster. So you could send down an extra couple guys and you'll be okay. You'll have about $4,000 in cap space to work with, which is not a lot, but it's under the cap. So we might be looking more, if they don't make a trade before the season starts, we're probably looking at a 21-man roster rather than the 23-man roster. And so that affects who is up and who is down, at least to start the season. But more importantly, who needs to go on waivers and who they might potentially lose. So I just think that context is important as we talk about extras or a 23-man or 21-man roster. Do we want to talk about kind of the bottom of the roster, the position battles first? Or I guess maybe we could cover just eventually they're going to have to trade someone.
I was going to say, let me start with this. Do you think they enter the season with a 21-man roster?
It would not surprise me if they did. I don't think they go more than a couple weeks into the season with that situation, though. They're going to have to move somebody. I think they can afford to wait maybe a week or two, but that's no way to go even a month into the season. That's too little flexibility because, I mean, you look at the schedule too. You do, as we mentioned, we have opening night opening day at home.
Yes.
But after that, they go on the road, and you're going to need at least 1 reserve player on that road trip. You don't want to be flying someone out from Coachella Valley last minute for a game if somebody gets hurt. So I think at that point, you're going to need some more flexibility. And certainly if Burakovsky or Dunn can't go, you're going to need that even sooner, because then you're going to have 0 extras. So it wouldn't shock me if they got to October 8th with a 21-man roster, but I don't think they should operate that way. I don't think they will operate that way for very long after, if at all.
Yeah, if Berkey was healthy, I would say, based on everything that we're seeing, like, it seemed almost certain that they would try to enter the season with a 21-man roster. But the Berkey situation really, like, shows the dangers of that. And like you said, the lack of flexibility, the fact that you are starting basically on a road trip, right? You get 1 game at home, but that's just not a lot of time that it buys you. I think they're going to have to make a move relatively quickly, like this week or next week. Like, I do not think you get to, October 10th or whatever, and they have not made a move yet. Like, I can't imagine that. So question then becomes, and this is, I guess, skip forward time, cover your ears if you're the type of fan that doesn't necessarily want to hear this conversation. Who is it, RJ? We know, we've thrown around the names of Tolvanen and Tanev and Gord. They still seem like the most likely candidates. Have you seen anything from any of them through the preseason and training camp so far that makes you think maybe Ron would lean in one direction or another on that?
No, I haven't. And nothing that's changed my mind. I've said in the past, I think it should be Tanev. It just makes all the sense in the world. You're taking the least off of your roster right now by moving him. I think he's the most replaceable guy. And at $3.5 million, it clears up more than enough to have the flexibility that you need. It just makes sense to me. I haven't seen enough from him where I feel like, okay, he's figured out the finishing. He's a difference maker. He's, back to being a true top 9 guy. No, he's a 4th liner, an expensive one at that. So I haven't seen anything from him. I haven't seen anything from bad from Yanni Gord that tells me that, okay, you really ought to move this guy instead, or an Eeli Tolvanen. And I actually, in fact, I guess what I have seen is, as you suggested on the last podcast, I know you said you'd like to see Tolvanen with Wright and Everly. They put that line together for the last preseason game, and through one game, it looked great.
Yeah.
Like, it looked fantastic. So keep Tolvanen around. I want to see more of that. Do not move him. So I guess cross Tolvanen out as far as the guys to be moved in my book. And then I guess one more that was asked about, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, that was asked about in the Armchair GM stream last night, was Will Borgen. He is on an expiring deal. And the reason he was asked about is, you look at the last preseason game against Edmonton.
Yeah.
And you had the Riker Evans and Will Borgen D pair out there for like
All
4 of the 5 goals
4 of the
against.
5 goals. Yeah.
And Evans was out there for the 5th because it was a power play or it was a shorthanded goal, right?
Yeah.
And the chemistry maybe not fully there yet between the two of them. I think trading Borgen would be a massive overreaction to that, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Could there be anything to that?
No, because I feel like the drop off from Borgen to, and this is part of it too, is like, who's going to be the 7th defenseman, and nobody really seems that eager to step up and steal that job right now. There's a couple options kind of going into training camp. You would have thought Mahura has the inside seat. He probably still does, but he hasn't looked great. Cale Fleury has not looked great. Like, nobody's really looked great in that spot. And so I worry about dropping off from a guy who has a lot of NHL experience to somebody who has not looked great so far through the preseason. I will say this, Borgen does seem to be struggling with the whole fact that teams are going to be faster against you now. That thing I was saying earlier, where if you're playing with speed, the other team has to play with speed. Borgen does seem to be struggling with that a little bit right now. I have to assume he'll figure it out, though. Evans Borgen never really, like, it doesn't make sense on paper. It doesn't really seem to make sense on the ice. It's very much a leftovers defensive pairing, right? Like, the other defensive pairings really make sense and they click and you can just tell that they work together. And this is the 2 NHL level guys that you have left and you're sticking them together. Even on paper, I don't really know how this is supposed to work, right? Between the two of them. And I think we're just kind of seeing that. And so the only way I would move Borgen is if you're moving him for another defenseman to pair with Riker Evans, right? Like, where it's just you're moving one guy who doesn't really fit your system that well to another team where they have one guy that doesn't really fit their system but is an NHL regular, and you're kind of doing that hockey trade. But that's the only way I think I would consider that, because otherwise I think you're just way too thin on defense.
Right. And even compared to Tanev or a Tolvanen or Gord, he doesn't even clear up that much cap space too.
No.
At 2.7, which is less. So I wouldn't do it. Also, I mean, one potentially encouraging sign is you look at last season. I think we noticed this toward the end of last year. Of all the Kraken D pairs that played last year, the one with the best expected goals share, Evans Borgen. They only played together for 32 and a half minutes.
Yes.
So very, very limited sample size, but they were good when they were out there.
Yeah, but it was a very different system, right? Like, they were being asked to do very different things. And in the current system, I don't really know how they're supposed to, like, it doesn't seem like it's going to work.
Very valid point.
But as bad as it might look, I think it probably looks worse if you sub out Borgen for one of the other guys right now. And so that right there is enough of a reason not to do it, in my opinion. Going back to the forwards, I'm with you. I want to see more from Tolvanen with Shane Wright. Obviously, it was my idea that the coaching staff heard and wanted to go with, so I have to say that. I can only assume, RJ. I will say this. I feel like this system does fit Brandon Tanev a lot better than the systems run under Dave Hackstall, right? The speed and kind of unleashing him, and to Tanev's credit, he looks more motivated than he did last year. Like, when I'm watching him in these preseason games, I'm going, wow, that's the Brandon Tanev I remember from years ago. And so I will give Brandon Tanev that. I still agree with you. He just makes the most sense because, yeah, $3.5 million for a 4th line winger that's crazy. So you should probably do that. Yanni Gourde, I feel like of the three of them is arguably has the least fit with the style of game that this team wants to run, just because he can skate and the conditioning is not really an issue, but his top speed might be at times. that is one thing to maybe consider. But to his credit, he looked a lot better in that game against Edmonton. Like, he was able to get down the ice and stuff like that. Like, I just think it's one of those where maybe as a center in certain situations he plays back a little so that he can kind of make up for that. But I do think if you were looking strictly on scheme fit, Yanni Gourde might actually be the one that you would circle.
Yes, I just think it'll take a little more adjustment for him. I think the skill set, he can absolutely make it work. It's just a little more adjustment with kind of where he's used to playing and what he's used to doing.
Yeah.
But I still think Yanni Gourde is a more valuable player. Absolutely. And brings more to a team and is more versatile too. If you need somebody who can, right now we're looking at a lineup as I have it written down on my notes, like without major injuries, right? I even have Burakovsky on here. But if you do start to have an injury, especially at center,
Oh,
you want Yanni Gourde to be
Absolutely.
able to step in there and do that in a way that Tanev just can't.
Right. And you look at the idea of replacing them too, right? If when you make this move, be pretty easy just to stick, Ben Myers or John Hayden in Brandon Tanev's spot. A lot easier than having to stick somebody in Yanni Gourde's spot.
Right. I mean, you then need a center, and I mean, I guess Ben Myers can do that, it's different.
It is. So I still think all signs point to Tanev there. When it comes to once a trade is made, RJ, let's assume it is, it's going to be one of these guys on the bottom. Who do you want, based on what we've seen so far through camp and training camp, who do you think is kind of best for that fourth line role that will be opened up whenever the Kraken do make a move?
I'd like to see Ben Myers. He's impressed a ton through the preseason. He's looked excellent. The scheme fit is certainly there. Yep. He's good at playing in transition, playing with speed. You only had to watch that Edmonton game to see, and he's been great all preseason, but really to see what he does best and his goal in that one too. And it's not just the fantastic shot to beat the goalie, but it's going along with the play, supporting his winger Melanson through his own zone, bringing the puck up the ice really quickly and finishing it off. Like that is, as I said earlier, that's the Dan Bilesma way you want to generate offense. And so I think Myers is a fantastic fit. I think he's going to be absolutely fine in a fourth line role. And more importantly, I think he's earned it through the preseason. I think that's the kind of message you want to send to a team where watching these guys, whether it's, Myers, Hayden, Winterton, Myers has just played the best out of all of them. And I think if that's the case, you want to give the job to him.
What's crazy is they've all played well, but Myers has looked that much better. And the other thing that makes me also like on board with this is how much Coach Bilesma talks him up. Like any chance he gets to mention how great Ben Myers is, he takes it. and he talks about it. And it very much sounds like from what he's saying, RJ, that he was like maybe involved in the targeting and signing of Ben Myers, which also maybe gives you an idea of where is in the hierarchy of who could make the roster and where else he goes, just because it very much sounds like this was a player that when Dan was sitting down with his staff and figuring out what kind of game they were going to play, he then circled this name and went, that's a guy that's going to play this style.
Yeah, and he's someone that Bilesma is familiar with from his time in the AHL and even NHL coaching, right? Who's had to play against. And I love the answer from him, or at least the start of the answer from him, because I think this is just really funny, so I'm going to tell the story. But he was asked about, Ben Myers had a good game, kind of what do you know about him or seen from him? And Dan pauses for a second. He says, I've feared him many times. And then explains that he's had to play against him and he's glad that he's on his side. But we were all wondering, where is he going with this? What are you talking about?
Blink twice if you're a danger, Dan.
I know. But it highlights the respect that he has for him, someone who's had to coach against him. And so, I think that might be a hint that he might have an inside track on that spot.
Yeah. And this also goes to the whole thing too of, would he have to clear waivers if sent down? Because I would be really worried about losing him.
Yes, he would. So he is not waivers exempt. He'd have to clear waivers. And that is, he's maybe the only guy that I'm looking at here that I'd be worried about being claimed on waivers if you were to waive him and send him down. Yeah.
So I like Ben Myers to take that spot. And I feel like he could play, wing. He has the flexibility of going over to center. If a center down the line gets injured, you could have him center to fourth line and kind of move everybody up the chain. So I think Ben Myers is probably that person who's earned the opportunity to have an everyday role with this team. I think when it comes to like who could hang around RJ as that like healthy scratch forward, I feel like John Hayden, this is where you start talking about John Hayden, just because Winterton, I think, is still waivers exempt, right? So
yes, he is.
You could, I think as much as I love Ryan Winterton's game, I still want to see him in a top line role with the Firebirds. I think I want him to continue and develop in that way for his long-term potential. But also, I think, John Hayden, I would hate to see the organization lose John Hayden in some way too. And I feel like having him around as a locker room guy, as a culture guy who comes in and plays 20 games or whatever over the course of the season, I feel like that's a good spot for him.
Yeah, definitely. And he was the other one I was going to mention who I hope stays up. And, if they do make a trade to move, Tanev, Gord, whoever it is, they're going to have the space to then have two reserve forwards. Myers would even take one of those spots. You could have Hayden and somebody else stay
Yeah.
too. If not, you get into a tougher situation where if you waive John Hayden, he's the other guy maybe I'm a little worried about, just because he brings such a specific thing that I think a lot of teams, might want or feel that they need.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would worry about just not having him in the organization, because even if he's in Coachella Valley, like, just such a valuable player to them on and off the ice.
Yeah.
But I think, and another guy that Dan Biles was familiar with and knows
Yeah.
him from CV, and I think that might be a reason he could even have an inside track on maybe that extra spot.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm thinking things there. Anything else with the forward, but kind of roster situation you want to talk about?
I guess we should mention Ryan Winterton, because I think he
Mhm.
has played very well.
Mhm.
And in a lot of situations, you'd say, okay, maybe he's earned a spot or he's earned a look. But I think we've talked about this, just the two of us, and we kind of agree that it's best for his development if he plays in the top six in Coachella Valley and really gets those experiences and that for
Mhm.
his development. I just think that's probably preferable. You agree with that, right?
I had literally just said that. So.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So yes, I do.
I had missed it because we got because we were updates from morning skate
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Anything
But
of note?
nope.
Yeah. So I feel the same thing about Winterton, because ultimately Winterton has kind of realistic middle six potential is what you're hoping to get out of Ryan Winterton, because he does have kind of a higher skill level than a traditional fourth line guy. You want him to develop and kind of be in a spot where he can come in for you in a more middle six role. You don't want him to kind of learn and develop all of his habits just as a fourth line grinder. Right, which is, if I feel like if you put him in the NHL right now, that's really what he's going to be doing and focusing on learning is those habits instead of learning kind of top six habits. So that's the reason to send him down and let him get that playing time and that development. Yeah, there's not really anything else. Like, Leighton Road needs more time in the AHL. Melanson, as fun as he can be, there's also just the head scratching moments on the other side. I feel like AHL is a better place for him. And yeah, so that's kind of the forward situation. We'll see how it all kind of shakes out. Defensively, RJ, like I said, I feel like Mahura still has the inside track on the 7th D spot, but it has not been the competition that maybe it should have been.
Right. He and Cale Fleury have, I'll say, just been unimpressive in the preseason. And so I don't think either one of them has separated from each other as far as winning that job. I mean, I've even got in the Armchair GM stream a question about, like, well, maybe how about Lajoie or someone instead? I wouldn't go that far. I think it's going to be one of those two,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I'm sure the coaching staff kind of has their internal evaluations, but I haven't seen anything that would, lead me to pick one over the other.
No, I kind of just default to Mahura because you brought him in. He is a guy who has played a full 82 game season in the NHL before. Like he can chew up significant NHL minutes if you like absolutely needed him to. He has experience he can fall back on. And so I think that right now is kind of where the roster is at, is that he's more valuable to you than maybe a Cale Fleury. Unless Cale Fleury was to push the issue, and he just kind of hasn't forced the issue.
And I think one thing that it might come down to also is that situationally, look, neither of these guys are getting into a game if everyone's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's an injury, it kind of depends on what you need, given that Mahura plays on the left side and Fleury plays on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
It might just come down to that, as far as if right defenseman goes down, Fleury plays and steps into that spot. If a left defenseman goes down, Mahura steps in and plays in that spot.
Has Mahura played on the right side before? Because I feel like he has, and he is listed.
He has,
yeah,
actually,
things as both sides.
Right. So, and this, thankfully, Cap Wages has this great tool with positions where, so it says Mahura 57.5% at left D, and then 42.5% at right D. So he can play both.
Pretty 50-50 split, yeah.
Which is maybe another reason that Mahura might have more of an inside track, because Cale Fleury is just 100% a right D. So
yeah,
that versatility might be more valuable. Now, can I ask you about this, though? Because if they don't make a trade before the 8th, or also, I guess the possibility too, if you can't find a taker for Tanev with a trade, or if there's a
Yeah.
team that works for him, that's because he has a 10-team no trade list. I know. He has a 10-team no trade list. But one way you could get around that is by putting him on waivers, and there really ought to be at least one team that's willing to pick him up for free. So that's what I would do if like for whatever reason, let's say Columbus wants him. Columbus is on his no trade list. You could just do that. But anyway, so if that move hasn't been made, you're talking about a 21-man roster, and waivers becomes important. And so that's only one surplus player that you can keep. It's given that we talked about Myers and Hayden potentially being worried about them being sent down, I think they might just send down Mahura and Fleury. Place them both on waivers. That's what I would do. Because I'm not as worried about either of them being picked up as I am about Myers and Hayden. I would just have the one surplus player be a forward.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually, because you can survive a road trip. You know, if a defenseman goes down, you'd be able to call somebody up, and if you had to play a game with 5 defensemen, you could. Especially this early in the season. It shouldn't, like, wreck you that bad. So I think there is something to that for sure.
So I just wanted to mention that, because I think we're talking about Mahura versus Fleury. I think there's a chance, at least by the start of the season, they're both sent down.
Yeah. I will also say this for, you know, it's not really relevant to anything on ice. I like that Josh Mahura tapes his sticks different.
Yes,
he's different colored,
pointing that out to me.
Different colored tape on all 3 of his sticks. I just think that's fun. In a world where guys are so meticulous about their sticks and everything that they do to it, I like that there's somebody out there who's willing just to be like, oh, I'll just have like different colored tape. I'd love the opportunity at some point to maybe ask him about that. Like, are they different? They look exactly the same. The sticks, everything looks exactly the same. I was wondering if they're like situational or something, but I wonder if that's like if there is some sort of superstition around that of like, you know, you play with the white taped one on these days of the week or whatever against certain teams, something like that. One's home, one's away, one's alternate jersey, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, hockey players are plenty superstitious, so nothing would surprise me with that. And yeah, he has one red one, one white one, and a blue one, as you pointed out to me. And you will have the opportunity to ask, because as soon as they open up the room, that's the perfect thing. You just go over and be like, "Hey, Josh, I was wondering about the sticks that you have there with 3 different tape colors. What's the deal with that?"
Yeah,
and they're usually happy to answer that. And so after I think the final cuts or so, they'll open up the room when it's just when they can fit all the players down into the one locker room. They'll open it up, and we'll have the chance to ask.
Well, then I hope Mahura makes it, RJ, and that your idea that did make sense a couple moments ago no longer makes sense for me, and I don't want it.
Well, as soon as they clear up the cap room, he should be back up.
Yeah.
Just might be an early season thing.
Yeah, but I knew that people would find that interesting, so wanted to fit it into the pod. I think that just about does it for the whole conversation around the roster battles right now, though.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly no controversy on the goalies.
Definitely not. You know the 2 there. All right, and that just about does it for this podcast as well. One more big shout out to Queen Anne Beerhall. If you are listening to this and you have the opportunity, go check it out for Monday Night Football tonight. Get that Seahawks game against the Detroit Lions and the last day of Oktoberfest. Get that 3-pound buffalo turkey leg. Gots to do it. Do it for me, if anything. And we will see everybody next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.